It began as a whisper of an untraceable rumor that spread through the palace corridors like wildfire. Late-night phone calls, sudden cancellations, and Catherine's unexplained absences soon followed. But when a senior aide was overheard saying it changes everything, even the most loyal royal watchers knew something monumental was coming. Behind those golden gates, the monarchy trembled not from scandal alone, but from a secret that could rewrite royal lineage itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Whispers became suspicious when palace insiders began noticing an unsettling pattern. Catherine's once consistent public schedule was suddenly filled with mysterious private engagements and postponed appearances. Every cancellation sent the tabloids into overdrive. But what truly alarmed the monarchy wasn't the rumors, it was the silence. Behind those heavy palace doors, aides were forbidden to speak, staff rotations were abruptly changed, and even senior courtiers were left guessing. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The press soon caught wind of Catherine's medical leave, a phrase that had been used before to deflect royal scandals. Yet this time, it didn't fit. Reporters pressed for details, but the palace response was chillingly vague. A private medical matter was all they would say. Those words alone set off alarm bells, for within the royal household, privacy is rarely granted unless the stakes are unthinkably high. The phrase became a cipher for something much larger, a decision that could alter not just Catherine's life but the monarchy's very foundation. At official events, William's demeanour grew heavy, his smile forced, his tone distant. Body language experts dissected every gesture, every glance between the royal couple, noting the widening emotional gap. In one moment caught on camera, Catherine's hand brushed William's arm, only for him to withdraw almost instinctively, a fleeting second that ignited speculation across the world. Yet, to those who knew the prince, his behaviour wasn't rooted in anger but in fear. He knew the truth, or at least part of it, and it terrified him. Meanwhile, in an effort to maintain control, Charles ordered a sweeping suppression order across the British press. Media outlets received quiet warnings. Any mention of Catherine's condition would be met with legal force. Editors complied reluctantly, though whispers still found their way to the public through coded language phrases like the Duchess's fragile months or a private family matter of great sensitivity. The nation's curiosity only deepened. Behind the scenes, Anne and Charles met privately, their conversations stretching deep into the night. She, ever the pragmatist, urged transparency. He, bound by duty and fear of chaos, demanded silence. The divide between father and daughter echoed the one now forming between William and Catherine. The palace was no longer united, it was fractured by a secret no crown could contain. And yet, through the confusion, one question haunted every whispered conversation and every sleepless royal night. It wasn't just what Catherine was hiding, it was why she waited so long to speak the truth. Months of Catherine's disappearance from the spotlight weren't mere coincidence. They were deliberate. Hidden from the cameras, away from royal duties, she carried a secret that could fracture centuries of tradition. The fourth child, never acknowledged, never announced, was said to be born under a veil of silence. But those close to the family whispered it was more than a child's birth. It was a cover-up ordered from the highest throne in Britain. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine's absence began subtly a missed engagement here, a postponed trip there. At first, the palace brushed off questions with polished statements about personal rest and family time. Yet as weeks turned into months, even the most loyal royal watchers sensed something was amiss. Behind that perfect facade, Catherine was not merely retreating. She was protecting something that no royal advisor could manage, no press officer could contain. Every appearance she cancelled was a battle between her heart and her duty, between truth and survival. Rumours spread like wildfire when the Duchess was seen visiting a private medical facility under tight security. Officials labelled it a routine checkup, but witnesses described unmarked vehicles, midnight arrivals, and staff ordered to surrender their phones. The secrecy was suffocating. Then came the most shocking move yet. One of the palace's most senior physicians abruptly resigned. His statement was vague, citing ethical concerns, but insiders knew he had clashed with King Charles himself. The tension between the king's determination to preserve the monarchy's image and Catherine's maternal instincts to protect her unborn child reached a breaking point. It was said that Catherine used a pseudonym during one off-the-record hospital visit, registering under a false name so that no official record could tie her to the birth. Only a handful of trusted staff knew the truth. One nurse reportedly described the atmosphere as otherworldly, as if the royal walls themselves were holding their breath. Every move was orchestrated to perfection, with no media, no leaks, no trace. But even within the palace, the secrecy began to crack. Those who once viewed Catherine as unshakably loyal now questioned her judgment, wondering what could possibly be so dangerous that it required deceiving the nation. For Catherine, the emotional burden was crushing. Torn between her instinct to nurture and her fear of betraying the crown, she lived each day haunted by what might happen if the truth emerged. Her once radiant confidence faded into quiet isolation. Even William, though fiercely protective, struggled to understand the full depth of her decision. His sense of duty to the monarchy clashed with his devotion to his wife. Their once unbreakable bond became strained, filled with unspoken questions and sleepless nights. Catherine's silence became the very thing that separated them, an invisible wall built not from mistrust, but from love, twisted by fear. And yet, no one could have predicted that Catherine's breaking point wasn't her silence. It was what she finally said when she could hide no longer. When Catherine finally spoke, the world stopped breathing. 4 words, simple, raw, and devastating, escaped her lips during a private conversation that was never meant to go public. But someone recorded it. Within hours, those 4 words leaked across networks, sending Buckingham Palace into chaos. The woman, once known for grace and calm, had just ignited the most shocking confession of her royal life. It happened during what was supposed to be a discreet meeting between Catherine and a senior member of her household staff. For months, the Duchess had been under immense pressure of public speculation, internal family strife, and the unbearable burden of secrecy. Every step she took was shadowed by eyes that watched, waited, and whispered. When the weight finally became too much, her composure cracked. The truth spilled out not through anger, but through heartbreak. Those in the room described her voice as trembling yet defiant, a tone born of pain and exhaustion. It was a confession not of guilt, but of desperation. A royal aide, one trusted for over a decade, overheard the exchange. Whether it was an accident or intention, no one knows. But within hours, the recording found its way into the hands of someone who understood its magnitude. "He isn't William's child." 4 words that ripped through royal tradition like thunder through silence. The implications were staggering if true. It threatened to shake the very foundation of succession, questioning the bloodline of the monarchy itself. Those who heard the recording said there was no malice in Catherine's tone, only sorrow, as though she was surrendering to a truth she could no longer hide. Inside the palace, chaos erupted. Phones were seized, corridors locked down, and senior aides summoned to emergency meetings that stretched through the night. The royal press office went dark, refusing to comment, while Charles reportedly demanded to know who had leaked the tape. The family's communications were frozen, and staff were instructed to delete all personal messages, emails, and call logs. It was a total lockdown, the kind of silence reserved only for moments that could bring a monarchy to its knees. For William, the blow was incomprehensible. Those close to him said he sat in his study for hours, replaying the words again and again, his expression empty, his eyes fixed on the floor. His silence became the loudest sound in the palace. He refused to answer calls, refused to issue statements, refused even to confront Catherine at first. The man once seen as the unshakable heir was suddenly lost, torn between loyalty to his wife and the unbearable question of truth. And yet, beneath the storm of scandal and speculation, something far more complex was unfolding. For Catherine, those words were not merely an act of confession, they were an act of defiance. The world heard betrayal, but behind them lay something deeper, something protective. Because the truth behind those words wasn't just about betrayal, it was about protection, legacy, and the price of being royal. The world saw William smiling at a charity gala days later, but those who know him saw the cracks. Behind closed doors, his silence was deafening. He had faced press scandals before, but this one cut into his bloodline, his identity as a future king. Friends revealed he didn't speak for 48 hours straight, refusing to eat, only staring at a framed photo of his family as the storm built around him. In those hours of silence, William's world collapsed inward. The man who had spent his entire life preparing to protect the monarchy now stood powerless against a truth that threatened to undo it all. The same institution that had defined him since birth now demanded he separate his emotions from duty. Yet the pain of betrayal was too personal to disguise behind royal formality. Staff described an atmosphere of dread within Kensington, palace doors shut, conversations whispered, and the sound of William pacing echoing late into the night. He wasn't the heir anymore. He was a husband and father, broken and unsure of what to believe. When Charles finally intervened, the confrontation was inevitable. The king, ever pragmatic, insisted that control must come first, reputation above emotion, silence above honesty. But William refused to be placated. For the first time in years, the tension between father and son spilled into open defiance. Charles spoke of optics and legacy, while William demanded truth. The king warned him that emotion was a weakness that could destroy them all, yet William countered that deceit had already done it. Those present recalled his voice shaking not from fear, but from rage restrained too long. That night marked a turning point. William was no longer his father's dutiful son. He was a man torn between preserving the monarchy and protecting his wife. The weight of that decision grew heavier when Prince George asked an innocent question over breakfast. He wanted to know why everyone was whispering about their family on television. The words cut William like glass. How could he explain betrayal, secrecy, and doubt to a child who still saw the world in absolutes? He excused himself from the table, retreating once again into the same silence that had haunted him for days. In that moment, the future king realized that the monarchy wasn't just losing the trust of the nation, it was losing the trust of its next generation. Princess Anne, ever the quiet voice of reason, visited him shortly after. She didn't offer comfort, only truth. "Truth has a cost," she said simply, her eyes steady. It was both warning and wisdom, the kind of advice only someone who had survived the crown's shadows could give. Her words lingered long after she left, stirring something in William that even grief couldn't suppress. He began to see the storm not as a punishment, but as a reckoning, a chance to define his reign not through obedience, but through courage. And just as the monarchy began to fracture from within, an unlikely royal ally stepped in to confront Catherine herself. No one confronts Catherine and walks away unchanged, but Princess Anne did. Known for her no-nonsense loyalty to the crown, Anne arranged a quiet meeting at Sandringham. Insiders later called it a reckoning. Anne demanded the truth not for the tabloids, not for the monarchy, but for her mother's legacy. What Catherine revealed that afternoon left even the Iron Princess speechless, blurring the line between royal duty and human heartbreak. Anne's arrival was unannounced, her tone direct, her purpose clear. She had watched the family unravel in silence for too long. While others spoke of damage control and press statements, Anne wanted answers. The chaos surrounding Catherine's confession had gone far beyond gossip. It had pierced the heart of royal credibility. To Anne, who had spent her life upholding her mother's values, the thought of another scandal destroying that legacy was unbearable. Yet, beneath her hardened exterior was something unspoken: fear. Fear that the monarchy her mother had held together with grace was on the brink of crumbling from within. When the two women finally sat face to face, there was no ceremony, no royal pretense, only truth waiting to be spoken. Anne's voice, sharp yet steady, cut through the silence. She demanded to know why Catherine had stayed silent, why she had allowed rumours to fester and shame to grow. Catherine, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply whispered that her silence was never meant to deceive. It was meant to protect. Words hung in the air like a confession wrapped in grief. Anne pressed harder, but the more Catherine spoke, the clearer it became that the 4 words the world had heard were not a literal admission of betrayal. They were a desperate attempt to shield someone else. Through tears, Catherine revealed the torment of living between truth and survival. Her secret, she explained, was not a denial of loyalty, but an act of sacrifice. She had chosen to endure suspicion and hatred rather than expose an innocent life to the relentless cruelty of the world. Her 4 words were meant to misdirect, to draw fire away from the real story, the existence of someone whose safety could not be guaranteed if the truth emerged. In that moment, Anne saw not a scheming duchess, but a woman suffocating beneath the weight of compassion. For the first time in her life, Anne hesitated. The rigid lines of duty that had defined her began to blur. She realized that Catherine's strength wasn't rebellion, it was restraint. Every tear, every silence, every falsehood had been part of a greater act of protection. The truth she had demanded came not as a weapon, but as a wound. When Anne finally stood to leave, her words were softer than expected. She told Catherine that truth, no matter how painful, could also be freeing, but warned that once spoken, it could never be contained again. That night, as Anne drove away from Sandringham, her thoughts refused to settle. She had come seeking clarity and left with questions she could not answer, because deep down she knew that the truth she thought she understood was already slipping from her hands. For King Charles, the scandal was more than personal, it was existential. With the monarchy's image already fragile, he demanded control. Late-night crisis meetings, legal threats to the press, and a chilling royal decree followed. Charles was willing to rewrite history itself to save the family name, but in silencing Catherine, he didn't realize he was igniting a fire that would soon consume his reign. The days following Catherine's meeting with Anne were some of the most turbulent of Charles's rule. Panic rippled through the palace as whispers of the recording and speculation about the 4th child reached every corner of the British press. Though the official media remained muted under legal restraint, the public was restless. Online forums and foreign outlets churned out story after story, each more sensational than the last. For Charles, it was a nightmare he thought he had left behind with Diana's death, a reminder that personal failings could destroy the monarchy faster than any political revolution. Determined to restore order, he summoned his most trusted advisors and convened an emergency meeting of the Privy Council. The agenda was simple: containment at all costs. What emerged from that meeting would later be known as Operation Silent Air. A confidential memo was circulated among senior officials, detailing a plan to neutralize the scandal before it reached irreversible proportions. The operation called for suppressing any rumors of DNA testing, sealing hospital records, and ensuring no staff member spoke to the press under any circumstances. Legal teams were dispatched to threaten major outlets with defamation suits, and confidential documents were ordered destroyed. Every trace of the child's existence was to be erased from public record. But the deeper Charles tried to bury the truth, the more cracks began to form within his circle. Not everyone agreed with his tactics. Advisors loyal to Queen Elizabeth's legacy urged transparency, warning that the monarchy could not survive another cover-up. Others, however, believed the crown's survival depended on silence. The arguments grew vicious. One senior aide reportedly warned Charles that history would not forgive him if he turned the monarchy into a dictatorship of secrets. But the king's patience had worn thin. He saw himself as the last line of defense against chaos, and believed that leadership meant sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was truth itself. Catherine, however, refused to bow. When presented with a document, an official secrecy oath forbidding her from ever speaking about the matter again, she tore it apart in front of them. Her voice, calm but resolute, echoed through the room as she declared she would not be bound by fear. Those present later described Charles's face as pale with fury. The confrontation marked the first undeniable fracture between the king and the Princess of Wales. It was no longer just a scandal. It was a war of principle versus power, truth versus survival. And as Charles tightened his grip on the truth, believing he could outmaneuver fate itself, he overlooked the one force he couldn't control, the relentless pursuit of the free press. Because while the palace played chess with the truth, a single journalist was about to expose what they'd fought so hard to bury. He was warned to stop digging. His emails were deleted, his press access revoked, and his phone mysteriously tapped. But one journalist who had once covered Diana's final years recognized a familiar pattern. Silence born from royal fear. Determined to uncover the truth, he followed digital traces, secret files, and a midwife's sworn testimony. What he found didn't just confirm Catherine's secret, it revealed a royal pact stretching back to Queen Elizabeth herself. His name was Thomas Hargreaves, a seasoned investigative reporter who had spent decades chasing stories most wouldn't dare touch. He had seen how the crown operated in the shadows, how inconvenient truths were erased, and how Diana's attempts to tell her story were silenced until it was too late. For Thomas, this wasn't about scandal, it was about unfinished business. The same system that had crushed Diana's voice was now closing in on Catherine, and he refused to let history repeat itself. When word of Operation Silent Air reached his desk, he knew he was onto something that went far deeper than anyone suspected. Hargreaves began by tracing hospital records, but what he found was startling. Several files from the Royal Medical Archive were missing or encrypted under restricted access. With the help of a whistleblower inside the National Health Database, he unearthed an unregistered birth record dated within the months of Catherine's disappearance, listed under an alias only used by the royal household. But there was no name for the father, only a sealed reference code linking back to an internal royal directive. It was the first tangible proof that Catherine's story wasn't fabricated. It was buried. Soon after, an anonymous insider contacted him using a private channel. The source claimed to have served as part of the royal medical staff during the time in question. They confirmed that the child did exist and that the cover-up had been sanctioned at the highest level. The source's chilling words stayed with him. This wasn't about scandal, it was about succession. The revelation that the child's biological father might be connected to another branch of the royal bloodline sent Thomas spiraling into dangerous territory. It suggested an internal family decision to protect the monarchy's continuity, even if it meant rewriting lineage itself. But Thomas wasn't only chasing documents, he was chasing humanity. In an unexpected twist, Catherine herself agreed to meet him. Off the record, in a moment of quiet vulnerability, she asked for one thing: compassion. Her voice trembled as she explained that the truth wasn't born of deceit, but of sacrifice. "If you publish," she said softly, "make sure they know I did it for love." That meeting changed him. The story was no longer a headline. It was a tragedy that revealed the monarchy's capacity to demand silence even from those who had given it everything. When he prepared to publish, a wave of suppression struck. His servers were hacked, his editors threatened, and the story pulled from international outlets at the 11th hour. Within hours, a coordinated media blackout swept across Britain. It was as if the story had never existed. But the truth had already slipped through cracks that could not be sealed forever. And as Thomas watched the palace scramble to contain the inevitable, he knew something was coming. Because even the journalist didn't foresee the next move, a televised royal statement that would change everything. Millions tuned in. Catherine and William appeared side by side, faces pale, hands clasped tightly. What the world expected was denial, but what they witnessed was redemption. With tears in her eyes, Catherine addressed the nation, her voice trembling as she spoke of truth, protection, and the burden of secrets. "I am not ashamed," she said, as the monarchy's future hung in the balance and the world waited for the king's response. The broadcast began without warning. No royal correspondent predicted it. No press outlet was briefed. It was an unprecedented act of defiance wrapped in dignity. As the image of the Prince and Princess of Wales filled screens worldwide, millions went silent. For the first time in history, the royal family's crisis wasn't being managed behind closed doors. It was unfolding before the eyes of an entire nation. Catherine's words carried the weight of every silent moment, every suppressed truth, every sleepless night spent hiding what should have never been hidden. She began softly, her tone fragile but unflinching. She spoke of choices made in fear, of love, twisted by pressure, and of a child who was never meant to be a symbol of shame. The truth, she said, was never betrayal, it was protection. In a statement, she confirmed what the palace had denied for months. The child existed, but instead of guilt, she spoke with the strength of a mother who refused to let the world weaponize her love. The tension in her voice cracked only when she admitted she had lived too long under silence, ordered by power, not conscience. Beside her, William said nothing at first. His presence alone spoke louder than any royal decree. When he finally did, his words were few but firm. He acknowledged that mistakes had been made not by Catherine, but by those who had forced the family to choose secrecy over compassion. "Our duty," he declared, "is not to the throne, but to truth." The phrase, "truth over titles," spread like wildfire within minutes, printed across headlines, shared in millions of posts, repeated by people who had once doubted them. In that moment, the couple stood not as heirs to the monarchy, but as parents and partners, united against an empire that had tried to break them. The nation's response was immediate and overwhelming. Crowds gathered outside the palace gates holding signs of support, while global news anchors spoke of courage, humanity, and the dawning of a new royal era. Public sympathy shifted overnight. Catherine was no longer the accused. She was the wounded mother who chose honesty over survival. Her vulnerability became her strength, and her refusal to hide became a declaration of independence. Even critics of the crown called it the most human moment in royal history. But as the applause echoed across the nation, another storm was already brewing inside the palace. Behind those ancient walls, loyalists whispered in disbelief, and the king's closest advisors demanded action. The truth had escaped their control, and its consequences were only beginning to unfold. Because while the world celebrated Catherine's courage, the palace walls whispered one final twist, one that redefined everything we thought we knew. Weeks after the broadcast, a sealed letter arrived at Kensington Palace. Addressed to Catherine in Queen Elizabeth II's handwriting, it was dated years before Her Majesty's passing. Inside were words that silenced every critic. "Blood may bind us, but love redeems us." The letter hinted that the Queen had foreseen this storm and had left behind her blessing for the child no one was ever meant to know about. The envelope was delivered in absolute discretion, its existence known only to a handful of aides. Catherine, already weary from weeks of public scrutiny, opened it quietly in her private study. The moment her eyes met the familiar script, she froze. The handwriting was unmistakably steady, graceful, and tinged with the warmth only Queen Elizabeth could convey. The words within were not just a message, they were prophecies. The Queen spoke of truth emerging at a cost, of storms that would test the House of Windsor, and of love's power to outlast deception. It was as if she had seen it all coming, the silence, the scandal, the heartbreak, and had chosen to leave Catherine not instructions, but absolution. The letter's tone was maternal and majestic. It spoke of compassion over convention, reminding Catherine that the strength of the monarchy was not in its secrecy, but in its humanity. "There will come a time," the Queen had written, "when silence will no longer protect us. When that moment comes, choose love, and you will honor this crown more than any duty ever could." Catherine read the lines again and again, tears falling onto the aged parchment. It wasn't just permission to be forgiven, it was permission to forgive herself. When William read the letter later that evening, he did so aloud before senior family members. His voice faltered halfway through, emotion cracking beneath the weight of his grandmother's foresight. Even Charles sat in uncharacteristic silence, his face unreadable, while Anne's eyes glistened with restrained pride. Only Camilla remained motionless, her expression caught between disbelief and disapproval. To her, the letter's message was dangerous. It legitimized a truth that had already shaken the monarchy to its core. But for the rest of the family, it was something else entirely, a lifeline. In the weeks that followed, the palace began to shift its stance. There were no public statements, no official admissions, but subtle gestures spoke louder than decrees. A quiet acknowledgement was made in the form of inclusion, an unspoken recognition that the child, once erased from record, was now part of royal history. It wasn't triumph, nor was it surrender, it was balance. The monarchy had learned that survival did not come from perfection, but from acceptance. For Catherine and William, the Queen's words became a compass. The storm that once threatened to destroy them had instead refined them. They understood that the Crown's greatest test was never the weight of tradition, but the courage to evolve. The Queen's final message lingered like a whisper through the palace halls, a reminder that even in silence, truth finds its way to light. As history writes its next chapter, one thing remains clear. In a world built on crowns and silence, Catherine's 4 words became the echo that changed the monarchy forever. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.